They say fear belongs on a motorcycle in the same way gravity belongs to the road. It exists whether you like it or not, and pretending otherwise only makes its presence more dangerous. But have you ever wondered why? In fact, riding removes layers of protection and illusion, and fear becomes the first honest reaction to that. Because a motorcycle offers freedom, but fear steps in as the quiet reminder that freedom is not the same as invulnerability. So, from the moment you sit on a bike, everything happens at once, without the slow pace that daily life usually allows. From the vibration of the engine beneath your body to the way wind presses against your chest, nothing is filtered or delayed. From that immediacy, fear emerges naturally, not as a flaw, but as recognition. From that recognition, riding stops being symbolic and starts being real. This is why fear earns its place on a motorcycle rather than being eliminated. This is why experienced riders rarely talk about fear, because when understood, that fear becomes a tool rather than a threat. But you've got to keep in mind, this is not the kind of fear that causes panic or hesitation, but the kind that sharpens perception and anchors attention in the present moment. Without fear, speed becomes a number instead of a force acting on a human body, and riders stop listening to the road and start listening to their own confidence. Confidence alone has never been enough to negotiate physics. There is a reason long-term riders speak more about respect than thrill. There is a reason survival stories often begin with near misses rather than victories. Fear keeps influencing a rider long after the adrenaline is gone because it settles deeper than excitement ever does. It carries memory, not thrill, and those memories quietly guide decisions on the road.
Take the next right and in 200 meters take a right.
Sooner or later, confidence grows faster than experience. It feels controlled, even earned, until conditions shift and expose how thin that confidence really is. That moment is usually when fear steps in, not as a warning sign, but as a correction that arrives before the consequences do. This fear does not cause panic or hesitation. It appears in small adjustments. It affects how firmly you hold the bars, how early you ease off the throttle, and how much room you leave yourself when things become uncertain. It sharpens awareness instead of narrowing it. A motorcycle reacts exactly as it is handled. It doesn't forgive impatience or overconfidence. Fear becomes part of the balance between rider and machine, limiting demands to what the road can realistically support. Control lasts only as long as respect does. Fear maintains that respect by keeping judgment grounded when confidence starts to drift. Over time, fear becomes a language rather than a sensation. With experience, riders begin to tell the difference between fear that protects and fear that interferes. That awareness slowly turns into intuition, showing up as a quiet sense that something isn't right, often before there's a clear reason to explain it. Motorcycling also strips fear down to something deeply human. There is no buffer between the body and the outcome. No protective shell to soften mistakes before they reach skin and bone. That constant exposure makes vulnerability impossible to ignore. Fear does not turn that exposure into weakness. It sharpens attention, keeps movement honest, and grounds every decision in reality rather than illusion. For many riders, fear is never just about the road. It carries the weight of people waiting at home, unfinished conversations and responsibilities that do not disappear when the engine starts. In that sense, fear becomes a form of care, not a restriction, but a reminder that the ride exists within a larger life. Real improvement on a motorcycle almost always begins with fear. Technique evolves because something once felt unsafe. Instincts sharpen because a moment demanded respect. Habits form because fear marked an experience as important enough to remember. Those moments stay with a writer, precisely because fear refuses to let them fade. Through this process, experience turns into wisdom. Errors become instruction instead of repetition. Survival becomes understanding rather than luck. Fear makes sure lessons remain present long after the road straightens and the danger passes. Even the joy of riding depends on fear far more than most riders admit. Calm stretches of open road feel deeper because awareness never fully disappears. Smoothness feels earned. Control feels intentional, not accidental. This is why riding often feels meditative instead of chaotic, why attention narrows without becoming rigid, and why the mind clears rather than races. Fear removes distraction and replaces it with presence, leaving only what matters in that moment. With time, fear doesn't vanish. It changes shape. As skills grow, it becomes quieter, but more exact. With experience, fear stops leading the ride and starts accompanying it, showing up only when conditions demand honesty. Mature riders don't try to erase fear. They learn how to tune it. With experience comes the understanding that fear and confidence are not enemies, but forces that balance each other, keeping judgment from drifting too far in either direction. On a motorcycle, fearlessness is not an achievement, and ignoring fear earns nothing. What matters instead is longevity, the ability to ride again tomorrow with the same awareness you carry today. Riding is real, and so are its consequences. Fear exists because it serves a function, preventing denial from quietly turning into disaster. Danger doesn't come from fear itself. It comes from dismissing it. Many riders are still alive, still improving, and still choosing the bike because fear reminded them to stay honest about limits. On a motorcycle, fear doesn't take away from the experience. It gives it its final shape. Another reason fear belongs on a motorcycle is that the environment is never neutral. Roads change without warning. Weather shifts mid-ride. Temperature drops alter tire grip. Rain doesn't just make surfaces wet, it brings oil to the surface, hides debris, and reshapes traction in ways that no amount of confidence can override. Fear keeps a rider alert to those changes before they become obvious. It encourages adaptation instead of routine, reminding the rider that yesterday's conditions have no obligation to repeat themselves today. Riding without fear in changing environments turns familiarity into assumption, and assumption is where mistakes quietly begin. Fear also exists because a motorcyclist never rides alone, even when the road looks empty. Every ride is shared with drivers who are distracted, rushed, tired, or unaware that a motorcycle occupies the same space. Being unseen is not a theoretical risk. It's a constant condition. Fear sharpens anticipation, not of what the rider will do, but of what others might fail to do. It influences lane position, following distance, and timing in ways that no rulebook can fully explain. This isn't paranoia. It is situational awareness shaped by experience. Fear acknowledges a simple truth. Survival often depends less on skill than on reading intention in unpredictable human behavior. So, now I want to ask you this. What role has fear played in your own riding? Has it ever protected you or taught you something you didn't forget? Share your experience in the comments. If you think this was interesting, like the video, subscribe for more honest riding reflections, and I'll see you on the next ride.